This week on the Virtual Skeptics, Bob is going to get blurry. Eve has a hunch about Richard III. Blake is being held hostage by Comcast. And back up,
Bastards.
Tim is going to try some science. I'm your host, Tim Farley, and this is Virtual Skeptics. We're live, and as you can see, I introduced Blake, but there is no Blake down below me because he is being held hostage by Comcast. He was going to be our guest tonight, and if you saw the invite for this early today, you would have seen that in the description. So, sorry about that, folks. We will re-invite Blake back, definitely, because he's a cool guy and runs a cool podcast on monsters. But we've got our regular panelists this week and a lot of cool stuff to talk about. Let me introduce the panelists for you. First, we've got Bob Blaskiewicz. He's CSI's conspiracy guy, web columnist, and blogger for Skeptical Humanities, and a contributor to the Swift blog at randy.org. We've got Eve Siebert, editor and blogger at Skeptical Humanities, and a contributor to Skepticality. And we've got me. I'm sitting in as a host for, I'm Tim Farley, JREF Pass Fellow, blogger at SkepTools, Skepticality contributor, and creator of What's the Harm? And no Blake and no Brian, as you can see. I'm sitting in as host, so apologies.
Brian is off fathering.
Yeah, he's got responsibilities. Like
No, not actually in the act of fathering.
Yeah.
Yes.
No. We do that during the show. No.
No.
So, anyone, if you are watching this live on Wednesday, you can ask us questions on the YouTube of this. If you're watching it embedded on the blog, you can click the little YouTube logo in the lower right corner and go to where you see comments. And you can ask us questions there. You can ask us questions on Twitter. Use the hashtag Virtual Skeptics, so we're sure to see it. Don't just address it to one of us. We'll see that eventually. And we have the Q&A app live if you want to ask us a specific question about something we're talking about in the show. Please reserve that for questions. If you just want to make a comment, put that on YouTube or on Twitter. And let's see. We've got no robots this week. We do have a trivia question. I think this one's going to be hard, but maybe some of you guys will get this. We'll see. As you know, in recent years, the MC of The Amazing Meeting has been George Rabb. But prior to that, for many years, prior to George Rabb becoming the MC was always Hal Bidlack, a very cool guy from the Air Force, former Air Force instructor at the Air Force Academy and other cool things. And Hal Bidlack, aside from being the TAM MC, was known for performing a show as a in the person of a U.S. founding father, one of the founding fathers of the United States. Which one? One of those guys on the money. Hal Bidlack would pretend to be that guy. Who is it?
This is the weirdest question yet.
I know. Well, I kind of ran late on the trivia question, and I was feeling mean. So, anybody who's been to TAM for back in the day, like TAM 4, 5, 6, will know this immediately, but or be able to think of it. But if you've only gone to the last couple TAMs, you won't have much chance of getting this.
We already have an answer in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll look at those.
I have no idea. I have no idea if it's right or not.
We'll look at those.
We're TAM noobs, so we don't know.
While we're doing the topics, and first up, we've got Eve.
Yep. Well, it's Wednesday, which is traditionally known as Hump Day. So today we're celebrating Hump Day with the most famous non-hunchback hunchback, and we have a slide to celebrate. Oh wait, no, that's not the right one. Sorry. It's the next one. Richard III, King Richard III of England. There are a couple of not quite contemporary portraits of Richard. There's this one and the next one. They're from the very early, they were painted in the very early 16th century, according to, I believe it's dendrochronology, or something involving the wood, but maybe based on earlier works. And you'll notice that he doesn't actually have a hump in either, but one of his shoulders is higher than the other, though x-rays of some of the portraits have shown that they were altered at some point to perhaps accentuate the deformity. So, brief history of Richard III. He was king during the Wars of the Roses between the Red Rose of the House of Lancaster and the White Rose of the House of York. His father.
Which one is Tinian a member of?
What?
Which house is Tinian a member of?
Tinian?
Isn't that the guy's name?
I think she's trying to make
Tyrion?
a Game of Thrones joke, and he blew
Is
it.
it Tyrion?
Lannister. Yeah. Ignore Bob.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
We're live, folks.
The Red Rose of the House of Lancaster and the White Rose of the House of York. Richard's father, the Duke of York, rebelled against the Lancastrian king, Henry VI, was killed in battle. Eventually, his oldest son, York's oldest son, became king, Edward IV. However, after he scandalously married Elizabeth Woodville, one of his own subjects, not a foreign princess, and a widow of a Lancastrian, one of his biggest supporters, the Earl of Warwick, rebelled and put Henry VI back on the throne, but only briefly. A year later, Edward IV was back, and they got rid of Henry VI that time, so he couldn't come back anymore. But then Edward died unexpectedly, leaving his 12-year-old son as king, and his brother Richard as Lord Protector. Before the young king could be crowned, however, he was declared illegitimate based on an alleged marriage pre-contract between his father and a woman named Eleanor Butler, which would render Edward's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville invalid. So Uncle Richard became king. Edward and his brother, Richard, Duke of York, were confined in the Tower of London, which was a royal. And then they disappeared mysteriously. Richard III's two-year reign was marred by constant rebellion, mostly in favor of Henry Tudor, who had a rather tenuous claim to the throne through the House of Lancaster. The rebellions, interestingly, did not attempt to place Edward V on the throne, what with him disappearing and all. Eventually, Richard was killed in battle at the Battle of Bosworth Field, which is near Leicester. His body was stripped and slung from a horse and buried in Greyfriars Church, and then later misplaced when the church was pulled down during the dissolution of the monasteries. Henry Tudor became Henry VII. He declared Edward V and his siblings legitimate, and then married the oldest girl, Elizabeth of York. During the reign of his granddaughter, Elizabeth I, William Shakespeare made Richard his first great villain, a murderous, child-killing, cunning, and witty hunchback with a withered arm and a limp who reveled in his own evil. We have also a slide of Shakespeare's, well, Laurence Olivier's Shakespeare's Richard III, which is sort of embedded in everyone's mind as what Richard III actually is.
He doesn't have a mustache to twirl.
Mm.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's hard to twirl with the withered arm and everything. So now people have actually been trying to rehabilitate Richard III's image since almost within Shakespeare's lifetime, the very early 17th century. Certainly no one thinks that Shakespeare's play is a particularly accurate portrayal. It's based on biased sources, and, you know, it's a play. Ricardians, who were people particularly interested in rehabilitating Richard III, have been particularly keen to point out that he was not physically deformed to the degree Shakespeare and others have portrayed him. And that deformity is also viewed sort of metaphorically as a visible manifestation of his deformed character or soul. And they also want to clear him of the charge of ordering the murder of his young nephews, the princes in the tower, and often they try to foist guilt off onto Henry VII. So as far as his physical attributes are concerned, the discovery in 2012 of bones not far from Bosworth have offered some justification. The Richard III Society was actually one of the main organizations behind the search for Richard's remains, so they were a sponsor. The church was located and bones were found under a parking lot where traditionally you do find your important bones. Based on DNA testing, examination of wounds, and certain skeletal abnormalities, the bones were declared to be those of Richard III almost certainly. And there was great rejoicing. Yay. And after a legal kerfuffle, the bones will be reburied with much pomp, presumably, in Leicester Cathedral.
Ooh.
This past week, yeah, there were some people wanted him buried in York, but he's going to Leicester. This week, The Lancet, British medical journal, published a study on the bones. And to the delight of Ricardians, medical science has proven definitely what's been known for a very long time, which is that Shakespeare was wrong about Richard's physical appearance. Richard was said to have a hump, a withered arm, a limp, to have remained in his mother's womb for 2 years, and to have been born with teeth and shoulder-length hair.
Are you sure they weren't thinking of an elephant?
Yes. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Co-author of the study, Piers Mitchell, said, "We were expecting him to have a hunchback deformity the way Shakespeare described." Now, I don't know why they expected that, because most scholars wouldn't have expected that. They don't believe he was actually hunchbacked. For a long time, scholars or historians have said that Richard probably had no very obvious physical deformity, that one shoulder was higher than the other somewhat, but probably not hugely obviously, and that he was short and slight. So, examination of the bones, we do have a picture of the bones. And this was actually obvious as soon as they uncovered it. There are pictures in situ where you can see this, although they weren't sure if that was because of the bones being disordered in the grave. But you can see there is a curve in his spine. So it shows he did have fairly severe scoliosis, and it wasn't just a disorderment of the bones in the grave. They made a 3D, used a 3D printer to make a virtual spine or a replica spine, and it's digitized, and I believe you can actually play with Richard's spine online if you so please. His scoliosis, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, go to the Lancet website.
It's apparently like the new thing, I guess, in museums is to, I guess they've always had that thing where they would take castings of stuff and put it out where you could touch it. But now it's like, well, if we're going to cast it, why don't we 3D scan it and then put the 3D scan up on the internet and either let people manipulate it virtually or print out their own copy of the artifact.
Yeah, so you can like twirl it around.
Put it in your hand.
Pirouette his spine on your computer. But anyway, he was known for his pirouetting.
Oh my gosh!
Anyway.
There's something about the spine here, though. I'm not convinced they didn't just set them out in a curve.
No, see, well, this is the reason why it's taken 2 years for the study to come out, because, you know, again, there are pictures of the bones in situ where people looked at them and went, yep, scoliosis. And even the scoliosis is one of the reasons, part of the evidence given that, yes, this is really Richard III. But they did look at it very carefully, and the way the vertebrae are, that they're, you'd have to read their arguments, but they're pretty sure that that's, and even specifically that it would have developed during his adolescence, after he was 10. So the scoliosis may have resulted in one shoulder being slightly higher than the other. He also would have appeared shorter than his natural height of 5'8", several inches shorter, so he would have appeared fairly short. And he was slight, so kind of exactly what people thought he looked like, essentially. So great, we've proven what we already strongly suspected. How have Ricardians reacted? Well, they are over the moon, or possibly on the moon, because some think the information about the bones will change the people's general attitude toward Richard. An AP story about the Lancet study notes, quote, Richard III enthusiasts hope the new research will prompt more people to reconsider the much maligned king. Some believe Richard III had his 2 young nephews murdered to keep his throne safe, but the king's supporters say his reputation was tarnished by the rival Tudor dynasty. Portraits of Richard painted during his lifetime were later altered to include a deformed shoulder. Then Phil Stone, chairman of the Richard III Society, calls Shakespeare's depiction of Richard a complete fabrication, which is perhaps not fair, because how do we know that Shakespeare didn't believe what he was saying? But he adds, there just isn't any evidence that Richard was the villain that he's been made out to be. He had a curved back, but so what? That doesn't mean he was a monster.
I'm not sure I understand the logic that's underlying these arguments or the passion behind them.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, this seems dangerously close to saying he didn't have a hump, therefore he didn't kill his nephews. And that's a little bit stupid. The Ricardians are really passionate, and I should say they've done some really useful things. They've made texts readily available. They supported this dig, so that they've done some things that are really of benefit to scholars in a variety of fields. But they really are passionate and single-minded, and this is a very, at least by implication, a very bad argument. Ricardians seem to be trying very hard to use the interest in Richard's bones to improve his reputation. But his physical condition has no bearing on his other actions, or his actions. His bones aren't technically actions. And while he certainly wasn't Shakespeare's villain, again, there are a whole bunch of things he's accused of doing in Shakespeare's plays that we know he didn't do. He was 2 years old, or he wasn't there at the time. So he's not Shakespeare's villain, but he's also not the Saint Richard that some of his supporters try to make him out to be. And while we'll probably never know definitively what happened to the princes in the tower, the most likely explanation is still that Uncle Richard had them killed. And his bones aren't going to change that.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool, though. But
yeah, it is cool.
Yeah.
It is interesting how much you can learn about somebody who died so long ago.
Yeah.
If you find the right piece of evidence.
Yeah, there are also, I mean, a lot of information about the wounds, and again, the quantity of wounds, I think, was part of the suggestion.
Does he
that
have
it was Richard III. Part of his skull was
wound?
Big head wound. There would have been brain matter showing.
Cool.
Yeah, I think part of it was sliced off. And another thing I saw mentioned somewhere, that while his deformity would have been very obvious most of the time, because he was dressed most of the time, when he was, it's true that he was stripped, slung over the horse, and possibly displayed naked, then the deformity may have been more obvious. And I don't if that may have contributed to stories about it.
Was he disenfooted?
What?
Disenfooted?
He has no feet.
In the picture?
Yes.
I don't know. I think it looks there as if it's just cut off in the picture.
Okay.
But other pictures, I'm not sure they do have the foot bones, or if they do have both foot bones. I'm not sure how complete the skeleton is. You'll notice also his jaw was completely separate from his head, the rest of his skull, apparently. Which is weirder than a hunchback.
Yeah.
I didn't talk that way.
I was going to make some type of snake joke, but it just didn't happen, so never mind.
Probably just as well.
Yeah.
True that.
Let's see what we got in the way of questions. Alex Murdoch came in late and is wondering where Blake is. Sorry, Alex. Blake had internet difficulties and could not join us. He's sort of online right now, but the problem with this technology is that if your internet is not really good, it's painful. So we will have Blake back at a later time. If you're looking for Blake, I was looking to see if we've had any other questions. We've had some funny comments, and some correct.
And I think one threat.
Good.
We've got a threat.
Yeah, my flub Game of Thrones reference means I'll have to be punished.
Yeah.
Amanda, yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe Blake will manage to get online long enough to send you a pun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's next? I guess I am next, right?
Yarp.
Speaking of threats, good segue there, Bob.
Yeah, no problem.
If you recall, a common topic on this show and on my blog is our friend David Mabus, also known as Dennis Marcuse. There is the one known picture of him from a convention back in 2010. And he was known throughout 2011 for harassing skeptics on Twitter, but he had been bothering people for quite some time before that. Particularly James Randi, who I believe he started on and then spread to B.Z. Myers and Dawkins and other people, and he would spam blog comments and any way he could get to you. If he found out your email address, he would email you.
Over.
And I got emails from him since 2008, and most of it, you can read the whole history on my blog. But basically, last week, I neglected to mention it on the show because we've had so many delays and so many false starts in his legal case since he's been arrested, that he had a hearing last Thursday, a week ago, or 6 days ago, May 29th. It was, immediately after last week's show, and I was going to mention it as we went out in the announcements, but I thought, what the heck, chances are it won't happen, because there have been many other hearings where nothing happened at. Well, lo and behold, the hearing was an important one, as I had been told it might be, and he actually pled guilty to 3 new counts. And I think I have the news story here. It's linked on my blog. Just go to skeptools.com and scroll down. We'll have the link in the show notes. But basically, he pled guilty to 3 additional counts. One was harassing me. One was threatening the life of a police officer, which
is always a good idea.
Yeah. He's not really well known for his
common sense.
Common sense, yeah. And violating his parole, which was what we spent 2012 trying to convince the police was true, that he had been told to stay off the internet when we got him arrested the first time, which was a major community-wide effort. We took a Change.org petition. It took someone in Montreal complaining to the press. It took people on Twitter kind of ganging up on the police department and da-da-da-da. And the whole sordid history, again, is on the older post about Mabus on my blog. But we finally got him arrested the second time, and actually the interesting little tidbit about that, those of you who were here watching that show may have experienced it firsthand, but part of the reason that he got arrested on that Friday in November of 2012, the second time, was because he had commented in the YouTube comments on Virtual Skeptics number 12, if you remember that far back. We're in episode, 91? That was only the 12th episode we had done. We weren't even talking about him. And he showed up in the comments and started threatening people. And I'll show you, you can't, if you go back, you can't see the comments because they got tagged as spam. But I went in and logged in as us, and I could see the comments because, you know, it's our account. And these are the comments. And as you can see, he said things like, the land will be bled, good riddance, JREF, the police won't save you, Farley, you need a little dose of reality, we're getting rid of all of you, you are finished, you are finished.
Shitheads.
Shitheads, yeah.
And
No,
hey,
shitheads.
This was during the show, while we're doing the show.
but wow, he do I see bitch without an asterisk?
Yeah, he was in the habit of doing that quite a lot, where he would asterisk out. I think,
Oh, that's right. He called Miranda a little blaspheming bitch.
Bitch, yeah.
I
Wow.
don't think it's because he fears dirty words. I think it's because he posts on so many different sites, and there's a lot of sites that have anti-obscenity,
Yeah.
you know, filter thingies, and he got in the habit of typing that way because otherwise his stuff would get, you know, spam filtered or whatever.
Oh, I remember. Weren't we Sense one time? Or it was C asterisk NTS. I assume it was Sense.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what he meant.
Yeah.
So anyway, I reported these comments to the police, and 2 days later was when he was arrested. So it was literally virtual skeptics that, you know, put the final nail in the coffin, or he put the final nail in the coffin during a virtual skeptics.
It's
And
a total unforced error.
Yeah, and he last week pled guilty to 3 counts. Like I said, he is out on bail currently. The one thing that we have heard is, again, they seem focused on the fact that he has some substance abuse issues. And there seems to be some confusion in the court as to what the nature of his mental illness is. It seems pretty clear that there is some form of mental illness involved in his case, and that's part of the reason we pursued it, because his family has not been taking care of that. Oh, sorry, I left that graphic up too long. His family has not been pursuing it. His mother seems delusional about him, that he's some sort of activist and not a spammer. So the only way we could figure out how to get him treatment was to get him arrested. So he's pled guilty again, and right now the sentencing is delayed till November 21st, and I assume that is so that they can evaluate him again. The judge said the judge is going to postpone sentencing stage of the case because the Crown, meaning the government in Canada, wants to conduct its own verification that cocaine and alcohol abuse are the only problems that Marcuse has, which we're pretty sure that they're not the only problems he has. I don't understand why the court has not understood this, but who knows what's going on there. I've been in contact with the police many, many times. I've never been in contact with the prosecutor, even though I'm listed as the victim in this case and in the previous case.
Yeah.
They just don't talk to people. So
Is that normal? Have you found that out? Or?
I don't know. Right here in this article, the article says that his lawyer told the judge that a psychiatrist, the lawyer told the judge that the psychiatrist attributed his actions to cocaine and alcohol. But the psychiatrist also noted that Marcuse is being treated for a delusional disorder, quote, which could explain his internet activities. You think?
Yeah.
The other interesting thing, and Bob remarked on this when I first posted this, was the thing that he said to the police officer when she came to get him, when she came to arrest him, was, and pardon the language, there's no stars here, "You bitch, the same thing that will happen to you like what happened to the World Trade Center Twin Towers in 9/11. And Bob's comment was, he's going to crash an airplane into the police officer?
That was my comment that Bob.
Oh, it was your comment?
I'm just gonna. He borrowed it.
Sorry.
Yeah, Tim.
Oh, all right. Sorry, I'm not attributing right. Well, anyway, so
it's not your fault.
Marcuse
It was me.
now,
I took it for me. Even tweeted it. Yeah.
Marcuse has now pled guilty to 11 counts total, and we're waiting.
Is he in custody now, or is he?
Oh, he's out on bail while they
Okay.
do this evaluation on him. So
Okay.
I don't know if, I've been kicking back and forth the idea of trying to get involved in the case, which would involve hiring a lawyer up there, which might be a lot of money.
Yeah.
But just to make sure that this thing gets followed through on properly when he's sentenced, because we want to make sure that he doesn't just go back to what he was doing for the third time.
Right.
And I'm beginning to think the only way that's going to happen is for me to go up there with a lawyer and show up in court and say, hey, look, I want an order put on this guy. But I don't know if that's possible, but at least we have 6 months to think about that. And
yeah. I in some ways, I think I'd have a hard time being in a room with him, honestly.
Yeah, well, I can't
considering what
really,
you've been through.
I can't really quote anything from it because the guy who wrote that article, the one and only article about the guilty case, has been emailing me. He was the one who told me there was going to be a hearing on the 29th. The police officer wasn't aware of it. And he encountered Marcuse in the hallway and
Right.
had a apparently very surreal conversation with him. And there's one thing that came up during all the stuff about, some of the later stuff that Marcuse posted online. He would use the royal we,
Right.
as if he was like in a team of activists or something. And I had people speculating that he had help, that there were other people helping him, and that some of the later stuff was not him at all, that he was locked up somewhere and other people were tweeting on his behalf.
Well, he claimed sometimes to be other people, right?
Yeah,
His
and he
own
had
supporters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all his recent posts have been under the name Dave Bauer or Arnold Rouge or Dave Strauss, other names, and he often claims to be a Dennis Marcuse supporter. Here's the thing.
Who writes exactly the same way.
When the reporter was talking to him in the hallway outside the court, he used the royal we in person, talking to another person. He referred to himself as we.
Did he wave like this at all?
Yeah, I don't know about that, but
A crown. He's gonna just pardon himself.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a sad case. I don't want to gloat over it.
Yeah.
But it is a good example of that if bad things are going on the internet and people are making trouble and laws are being broken, that things can happen, but you got to stick with it. We've been with this case, when was the first threat I got on Twitter? Was like January 2011, and it took until now to get the second guilty plea. So, you've got to stick with it. You can't give up. I've seen a lot of people blog about Marcuse and then say, I throw up my hands, the police aren't going to do anything. Well, the police will do something if you badger them enough.
Yeah. I think it seemed to me that his posting habit was robotic. That it didn't really matter who you were. That he was a copy paste spammer.
Yeah.
On to the 100th degree, and I think that's what got him in trouble. You put because he was kind of like internet herpes. Like, if you would mention someone in a tweet or on Facebook or whatever, he would find out that was a person to add him to the list of people that he was going to
bother. Yeah.
And so it wasn't a day. The reporter.
Yeah.
CC'd or included the Montreal police.
Yeah, that happened a number of times where Marcuse would tweet directly at the police or other reporters or things like that, seemingly not in his own best interest. It was ridiculous. And, I remain convinced that if he could get his act together enough that he could set up a blog and actually blog about this stuff, write some semi-coherent posts about why he thinks atheism is bad or whatever it is he's on about, people would come to his blog and would interact with him. But the thing that gets him in trouble is he insists on going to other people's websites and intruding on threads where he's entirely off topic and just bothering people.
There's the threats.
Yeah, well, the threats got completely out of hand. I gotta say, he has laid off on the threats, the direct threats, since the first case. I haven't seen anything that approached
except to the
really.
police, maybe.
Well, yeah, yeah, except for that threat to the police. He's been better at that, probably on the advice of his attorney. And he has been avoiding talking to me because ever since that day that he said that thing to the police officer, because of what he said that day, she had an order put in place for herself and for me that he's forbidden to contact either one of us. And he has, as far as I know at this time, obeyed that order. I have not, of course, because I'm known as the organizer of all the reaction to him, I end up seeing all his emails anyway because everybody forwards them to me and says, "Hey, Marcuse is back." So it doesn't. The order actually doesn't help. But that's partially my fault. So I don't blame anyone for that. Let me talk about something a little bit more interesting. Let's talk about some science. I promised some science at the top of the show, right? And there was an interesting show. I blogged about this yesterday, and you can go to my blog and read the post. There was an interesting, it was actually an artificial intelligence conference, but it was focused on webs and weblogs and social media. It's an old conference, so they still use the term weblogs. They were actually talking about changing it to blogs. But one of the papers, and there's a bunch of papers that are skeptic relevant. There was a paper about Snopes, snoping people on Twitter and whether or not that works.
Yeah.
There was a paper on how you decide whether or not someone is trustworthy. There was a lot of interesting papers, and they're interested in it from a machine learning standpoint of can we build devices that will automatically determine whether people. And there was a very interesting paper about a new method of figuring out, it was actually a poster session, a new method of figuring out whether people are bots or real on Twitter. And basically what they would do is they would start with the verified accounts, which we're all pretty sure actually are people, and kind of work their way out by who they talk to, right? So if a verified account starts a conversation with this person, then this person is real. Right, and then if this person starts a conversation with this person, then we assume this person is real. And you kind of work your way out to find where all the people are on Twitter, and everybody that's left are the bots and the spammers, which is kind of an interesting idea. But I want to talk about a paper that was about, really about voting behavior. There's a lot of, starting with Slashdot and the Stack Exchange sites, and lots of different sites have YouTube right below this video. There's ways to vote on things. You can vote things up. You can vote things down.
Vote ours up.
Yeah, please vote ours up. Facebook has like. Now, many sites like Facebook only have an up vote, have a like. Some sites like YouTube have an up and a down. And what they were looking at was discussion sites, commenting sites that have both an up and a down. And they wanted to look at how people use the up and down. Do they use up more? Do they use down more? Does down, and in particular they were interested in if you vote bad comments down, does that discourage people from making bad comments, right? And if you vote comments up, does that encourage people to make more comments? And there's a lot to the paper because obviously they had to analyze what's a good comment, what's a bad comment. But they had this huge data set because they partnered with Discuss. If you go to a lot of sites like CNN, DISQUS, they do the comments below the site. And Discuss has up and down votes. And so they sucked this giant data set from Discuss of like a year's worth of messages on CNN, Breitbart.com.
Are there any good comments at Breitbart?
Yeah, I was going to say,
they were interested in the voting behavior, not the contents and the topic of the comments. They were interested in how people deal with good versus bad comments. So they wanted things that were different sorts of things. And one of them was all K-pop. Oh, and IGN, which is a gaming site. So they had a pop culture site, they had a gaming site, they had a politics site, and they had a general news site, right? So they were trying to kind of mix it up. And it was like 42 million messages with like millions of commenters and hundreds of millions of votes. And the interesting thing that they found was, and let me zoom this slide up so you can see it, was if you positively evaluate people, it tends to make them post more. This chart is a little weird and hard to read. It's explained in the paper, but stuff below 100 means that you posted more after someone voted on your initial comment. And they tried to track people like from the time they joined to when they quit. So they didn't consider any comments that were made by users that had been around for 5 years, because they wanted to see how a new user coming in, I'm a noob, they get voted up or down, how does that affect their behavior? And what happened was both positive and negative comments made people post more. And they're not significantly different, not too much different. Positive made people post a little bit more. Actually, negative evaluations increased posting frequency more than positive evaluations. So voting someone down actually increased the chances that they were going to post again. But not evaluating them, ignoring them, decreased the chance that they were going to post again. And someone tweeted as this guy was presenting the paper, and I agree, this is do not feed the troll in chart form. Right in front of you. On a discussed comment thread, if you see a troll, don't vote him up, don't vote him down, because either one is going to make them post more. The other thing that happened was let me go to the next slide, which is over here, was that negativity breeds negativity. If you evaluate someone negatively, they tend to vote negatively on other people. And it becomes a downward spiral. They start commenting more, they start voting on other people negatively more, and it goes to hell in a handbasket.
That is, you just explained all YouTube comments.
Right, exactly. Exactly. This is do not feed the troll right there in a data set. Now, again, feeding, a lot of people misunderstand do not feed the troll. They attribute a lot of things to the word feed that aren't there, or that are or aren't there. In this case, we're just talking about voting. We're not talking about talking to the person. And they were evaluating that separately. There's a lot to this paper. There's 10 pages of deep stuff, and there's a lot of data. So maybe I'll blog about it again, dig into it deeper and blog about it again, see if I can find some flaws in it. But I thought it was interesting because we see skeptics all the time blogging about this paper or that and whether or not it proves homeopathy or it doesn't prove homeopathy or psi powers or whatever. But I think we ought to dig into this kind of research some more too and apply it to our own techniques in terms of, does sending someone a Snopes link actually convince them that it's bad information? There's a paper on that from this conference. So if you go to my blog, you can see that post. I've got links to, I pulled out all the papers that kind of looked like to me had some sort of skeptic relevance or relevance to something that's being discussed in the skeptic community recently. And you can click to those. And the nice thing is this is an open access organization, open access conference, so all the PDFs are there. You can read. In fact, they were there before the conference even started. Nobody
showed up. It was amazing.
Yeah. No, there was a lot of great Twitter activity about the conference. So if you want to see who the people are who are thinking about these things, you can go through the Twitter. Go through the hashtag. I've got a link to that in my blog and see who's talking about it, who was talking about the conference, and you'll see the type of people. A lot of them are journalists and journalism professors, and a lot of computer scientists, obviously. And there's obviously flaws, and actually there was a very good paper.
Where was this held?
This was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Mm-hmm. The next one next year is in Oxford. And there are quite a lot of conferences that do. And, a lot of these Twitter studies have flaws, and in fact there was a paper that was presented this morning by a journalism professor from North Carolina, whose name I will butcher if I try to say it, Zeynep Tufekci. But if you follow all what's going on in Turkey recently on Twitter, you'll see her head pop up because she blogs and writes op-eds and talks about Turkey. But she was at this conference and she presented a paper about methodological flaws in a lot of these studies people do with Twitter. So that was just a plain old skepticism paper, just not, about skepticism, but she was just applying skepticism of, hey guys, when you're analyzing these data sets, you need to think about human behavior, you need to think about sociology. It was pure skepticism type stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff like that going on, and you see so many people talking about this troll thing worked for me, or this harassment thing didn't work on our blog. There are people who study these things, and there are peer-reviewed papers being written about them. So that's all I got. I went on for way too long. So I will hand it off to Bob.
Very good. All right, so I'm going to do kind of an overview of some. There was a lot of really interesting stuff on the web this week, so I'm going to be kind of doing a sort of news blurry thing. All right, so first up, putting the Zen in Frozen. One of the wealthiest godmen in India is no more. He has ceased to be. Or perhaps he's just pining for the fjords. Yes, if you were on the internet this week, you noticed a sharp uptick in parrot sketch references on the heels of the announcement that a court in India has been asked to rule on whether or not this man, if you could bring up the image, Ashutosh Maharaj, is dead of a heart attack or alive of a meditation. A really, really deep meditation known as Samadhi, where the guru has become one with the universe. Samadhi may take months, might require that you keep the corporeal vessel stored in a freezing meat locker since January when it started turning green, and could well keep up a $170 million fortune at the disposal of a cult. Or as Blake put it, the real issue here isn't the frozen guru, it's the frozen assets. And if you want to the next image it's a little gruesome. It's what the guy looks like now. Independent doctors noticed that he has no heartbeat. He has no respiration. He has fixed and dilated eyes. The family believes that he's dead.
Also, he's frozen.
Also, he is frozen in a frickin' meat locker. They want to have the appropriate rites performed, and then the death led to the goofiest sentence ever published in the Telegraph, quote, although Punjab police initially confirmed his death, the Punjab High Court later dismissed its status report, and local government officials said it was a spiritual matter and that the guru's followers cannot be forced to believe he is dead. You know what? Put him in your living room for a couple weeks and then tell me it's a spiritual matter, dude. Anyway.
So, do we have meat in the freezer that maybe is just in a deep trance?
It's entirely possible.
I'm a little concerned.
Entirely possible. Yeah. The death also led to the best sentence ever to come out of a Tribune of India article in February when the story first hit the press. Quote, the plea will come up for hearing on Tuesday along with a habeas corpus petition filed by Puran Singh for the Spiritual Heads production. I love the habeas corpus. I'm sorry, but it's literally a habeas corpus. Anyway, a little... Yes, Eve?
I was just moving.
Oh, okay. I can't see you, so... let me see. A little closer to home. Two 12-year-old girls in southeast Michigan, Wisconsin. Damn it. Waukegan, is that the name of the town?
Waukesha.
Waukesha. I don't know why I have Waukegan there.
That's something else.
Yeah, all right. They were arrested for stabbing a friend 19 times in order to propitiate the Slender Man. The Slender Man, if you could bring up the next image, is a character that was invented as part of a contest on the web in 2009. The character was created by Eric Knudsen. It caught on and it's a figure that reportedly lurks in the background of photographs. He's very tall, he has long arms, and he's kind of acquired a whole suite of disparate characteristics since his inception. The girls who are, and there's an entire backstory that's developed. People say they find references to him in, like, I don't know, 16th century wood carvings or whatever. Right. You know, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But so the girls are being charged.
Did he have a hunchback?
Maybe.
It's entirely, no, he was slender and very tall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So since he was created, anyway, these girls who are being charged with first-degree attempted homicide were fascinated by the character and read about him on the Creepypasta Wiki, a horror fiction site. According to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, one of the girls, quote, told the police that the Slender Man is the leader of Creepypasta, and that in the hierarchy of that world, one must kill to show dedication. She said that the other girl told her they should become proxies of Slender Man and kill their friend to prove themselves worthy of him. She said she was excited to prove skeptics wrong and show that Slender Man really did exist. The suspects believed that Slender, as she called him, lived in a mansion in the Nicollet National Forest in northern Wisconsin. The plan was to kill the victim and then walk to his mansion.
How close are we to Slender Man's mansion?
I have no idea, but we're probably not too terribly far.
I don't know.
Summer vacation.
Close would you be to pixels in a JPEG?
Yeah, no kidding.
That's the only place he exists.
Well, there is that, yeah.
So the girl who was stabbed has been upgraded to fair condition. The two girls face 65-year prison sentences. And it seems the one thing that struck me as really strange was how detailed the police report was. And it turns out that they were questioned without a lawyer. So that's not good.
Really not good. How old are they again?
12. Being charged as adults.
Yeah, but that doesn't seem kosher at all.
No, that's not cool. I mean, don't get me wrong. They need to be put away for a while. But, yeah. So anyway, that's a bummer.
Yeah. I got a little bit of crap on Twitter today because I tweeted this, and a few people thought I was attributing a murder to a fictional story, as if I was trying to blame D&D for someone doing something.
The thing about that one,
this is a problem I've had since the beginning of What's the Harm, is people always want to point to a case and say, this caused this. And that is not the way reality works, okay? Things have multiple causes, and I've had that in the FAQ on What's the Harm since the beginning, that there is no one cause of anything. And there may be mental illness involved here. There may be personality disorders involved here.
There's weird group dynamic in the case of these girls.
Weird sociological group dynamics.
Could be Slender Man. Wait, no, that couldn't
be Slender Man.
Tiny possibility Slender Man is actually real and causing all this. But part of this is certainly a society or a element on the internet that would like these stories to be real and presents them as real. And if you take people who have perhaps personality disorders, perhaps mental illnesses, and bombard them with bad information that is not clearly tagged as fiction, weird things are going to happen.
At the same time, though, I think that applies for just about any cultural influence. You see people latching on to that whack job in California, latched on to these men's rights groups, so part of his rampage was certainly attributable to that, except he would have grabbed onto something,
Yes, it's hard to predict. Yes, but my basic point that I always make is these things are gray. And, let's assume the guy in California was mentally ill, and let's assume that MRA stuff did influence him. Certainly he would have been better off if he hadn't been exposed to that MRA stuff. Yes, he might have latched onto something else and done it anyway. But being exposed to bullshit is never a good idea. That's the bottom line on what's the harm. Exposing people, especially vulnerable people who have problems, to bullshit like homeopathy. And the opposite, the flip side of this is to say, oh, mental illness, that answers everything. That's not a good answer either. To say just because the person was mentally ill, all bets are off on, culpability or whatever. It's these cases are very gray, and you have to have some subtlety to it. And
in this case, at this point, we don't know quite.
Right. We don't know the
hell.
details.
Yeah.
It was a news story, and I wanted to tweet it while it was still newsworthy. So
I thought it was going to be, what's the harm in stabbing a friend?
Well, the way I worded it was, what's the harm in online myth-mongering? Not what's the harm in goofy fiction or photo contests. There was nothing wrong with the original photo contest. There's nothing wrong with writing creepy Slender Man stories.
It's actually a pretty cool phenomenon, honestly.
It is kind of interesting.
Up to a point, yeah.
And actually, if you go back, there's a cool podcast that On the Media does called TLDR, and they dug back through it, and they found the guy who was the guy who created the original photos, and interviewed him, and said, well, what do you think about all these people like writing stories about this goofy character that you did in a Photoshop contest? And it was kind of an interesting little podcast.
It was a really good one. They're kind of a spin-off of On the Media, which is another thing that I think skeptics should be watching or listening to. Another very good one. I went back, in fact, to the TLDR story, and they're trying to get in touch with the guy again to find out what he thinks about this. I suspect he's going to have a hard time.
Bad.
Yeah.
One would think.
Does Slender Man remind anyone else of those things they have outside of car washes or with the blowing air on the
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't kill for that though. One of those things.
No.
But
okay, so another story that I have this week. If you could bring up the next image, please. One of the funniest researchers on the planet, M. Kamal Ermak, published an article in the Journal of Medicine and Health entitled "Schizophrenia or Possession."
Mm-hmm.
It is just every bit as bad as the title suggests. Sharon Hill sent me.
Sharon,
what's that?
Hill.
God, I remember something. There was a streak or something. I forget. But she sent me the original, and it's 4 pages of uselessness. Here's a sample from the abstract. Quote, we thought that many so-called hallucinations and schizophrenia are really illusions related to real environmental stimulus. One approach to this hallucination problem is to consider the possibility of a demonic world. Demons are unseen creatures that are believed to exist in all major religions and have power to possess humans and control their body. Demonic possession can manifest with a range of bizarre behaviors which could be interpreted as a number of different psychotic disorders with delusions and hallucinations. The hallucination in schizophrenia may therefore be an illusion, a false interpretation of a real sensory image formed by demons. A local faith healer in our region helps patients with schizophrenia. His method of treatment seems to be successful because his patients become symptom-free after 3 months. Therefore, it would be useful for medical professions to work together with faith healers to define better treatment pathways for schizophrenia. That, I swear to God, is all the information he gives us about this healer in the region. That's like it. He just says, and they're symptom-free after 3 months.
Because he said.
Yeah. So it was really bad. And as you could probably guess from that, he could be the editor of the Journal of Special Pleading.
Or
especially if you look at his other publications. You could take his scientific study on the moment of ensoulment, the 13th week of pregnancy, actually. My God, this one was awesome. His article on the mechanism on how ensoulment happens, and it's dark matter up the nose during the 13th week of gestation.
Holy crap!
I know, it's awesome.
Is that weirder than
published in?
the way the Roman Catholic
I
Church
forget
looks
which
at
one it's
ensoulment?
published in, but I have links to all of these articles,
Oh, all right.
and the ones that I couldn't get PDFs of, I have on Interlibrary Loan, and I like to think I keep Interlibrary Loan personnel's jobs interesting, you know. But then lastly, his article on how the Virgin Mary, quote, is a chimera of 46XX46XY type, resulting from the fusion of two embryos of different sex types, and both ovary and testes developing in her body.
Okay.
This guy is my new favorite.
Oh, this was to explain how she could have a virgin birth?
A virgin birth. It was the embryology of the Immaculate Conception.
What? No, the Immaculate Conception.
Oh no,
is
the Annunciation.
birth. Yeah.
Right. Yes, the Immaculate Conception is Mary being born without sin. People always get that wrong.
Without original sin.
Right.
Right.
Okay, and then very last story, if you could bring up the next image, Gwyneth Paltrow heartlessly murdered a bottle of water as it begged for mercy. Or, at least that's what we'll have to conclude if she's right. It seems that she once bought Masaru Emoto's peer-reviewed coffee table book about how water freezes differently if you're mean to it. She mentioned her admiration for it in a blog post this week, which of course means that, if you could bring up the last slide, that the scene in which the coroner in the movie Outbreak cut open Paltrow's skull and was horrified by what he found inside was shot without special effects.
Oh, Bob.
And that's the bunch of news that ain't.
All right. Well, people are already creating Slenderman virtual skeptics memes.
Yes.
I retweeted one from the Virtual Skeptics account, so you can see it on the blog. And that is frightening me.
Oh my God, that was fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. While we're in the show, we're getting memes created.
We live in the future, people.
Yeah, totally. It's the influence of those Australians. Okay, so we are getting to the end of the show. We're running horribly late as usual, even with only
there are
three people.
of us.
Yeah.
It's just 5 minutes late. That's cool.
I know. Okay, so answer the trivia question. To my pleasant surprise, several people got it. I think it was around the same time, but I think Nathan got it first, but Howard Lewis also got it right around the same time in the YouTube comments. Nathan tweeted it. The question was, what founding father does Hal Bidlack perform as occasionally? And the answer is Alexander Hamilton. So good job, guys. You win nothing. Announcements. There was no skepticality this week. The TAM
Scholarship funds.
Scholarship programs, grant programs are still running, so you can go to icbseverywhere.com or risingstar.sarahmayhew.com and either donate or apply. Bob will be in Los Angeles speaking to IIG West. Very cool. On the 15th, talking about fighting cancer quackery. I assume in the Steve Allen Theater?
I guess. I don't know. I know nothing. I'm just showing up and with a story to tell.
But yeah, right there on Hollywood Boulevard. Very cool group of people. I hope to get out there one of these days. And Rebutter, our old friend Rebutter, now has added a cool feature where you can get the best of Rebutter emailed to you via MailChimp from right here in Atlanta. If you go to their blog, blog.rebutter.com, There's a blog post about what's in there, and basically they kind of cull through, what people are rebutting on Rebutter and send you kind of the top stories that skeptics are writing rebuttals to, which is kind of cool.
Which is handy because Google Chrome disabled Rebutter for some reason on my computer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
It just said, no, it doesn't come from the Google Chrome store.
Oh. Okay. You might need, maybe you had an old version?
I don't know.
Oh.
I tried to install it again, and it didn't work.
Okay, so it's book time. You guys get ready. I'm going to go ahead and give you cover for getting ready. This book primarily deals with spotting humbug. However, it is important to be able to put forward rational reasons for believing or not believing a particular claim. There are numerous techniques one can keep in the intellectual toolbox which can help in this process. This section of the book outlines some of these techniques and rules of thumb. Occam's razor. If there are two or more equally valid but conflicting hypotheses for an observed phenomenon, one should choose the hypothesis that requires the least number of steps and assumptions to explain it. If you have different explanations for something, all of which can explain it equally well, then you have no reason to choose a complex reason over a simple one. Eve, you go next.
Thou elvish-marked, aborted, rooting hog, thou that was scaled in thy nativity, the slave of nature and the son of hell, thou slander of thy heavy mother's womb, thou loathed issue of thy father's loins, thou rag of honor, thou detested, etc., etc. The day will come that thou shalt wish for me to help thee curse this poisonous, bunch-backed toad.
Why are you reading my mom's emails to me?
I know. I was going to say it was a note I left for you this morning.
Drop the ramp, Lieutenant Godwin ordered. Drop the ramp. The water was 8 feet deep. Romansky moved out and immediately hit bottom. He threw away his rifle in Bangalore, inflated his Mae West, and swam toward shore, or rather paddled as best he could until his feet touched bottom. Then he crawled to the beach, jumped up, and ran a few meters to the base of the cliff. There were already men there, some dead, some wounded. There was wreckage. There was complete confusion.
Huh. Interesting. My book is on my iPhone because it's a Google book, and boy, that doesn't show up, does it at all? It's Humbug, the Skeptic's Field Guide to Spotting Fallacies and Deceptive Argument, 2nd edition. This is Theo Clark and Jeff Clark's. They are from Brisbane, Australia, one of the many great Australian skeptics, and they have a website where they do logical fallacies and stuff, and I think they did a podcast for a while, and now they're doing a new edition with ebooks of their sort of skeptical guide to spotting humbug. So I incorporated a plug into my book time.
Hurrah!
Eve, what was your book?
It was Richard III by William Shakespeare from the Norton Shakespeare. And it's really good, and you should read it.
It's good. It's got a lot of pages, and it's heavy, so you can use it as a weapon.
Well, yeah, the Richard III isn't that.
I actually make sure that, like, anybody who is going to say that Shakespeare ain't Shakespeare, read the introductory material to that book, which lays out everything that we know about him.
Or the Riverside, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, my book was D-Day, June 6, 1944, The Climactic Battle of World War II by Stephen Ambrose. And I suspect that passage was about Rangers landing at Point du Hoc 70 years ago this week.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Unbelievably. 70 years, man.
Oh, yeah, and 65, my skeptic history today, 65 years ago today, Comité Para, the skeptic, one of the oldest skeptical paranormal organizations in Belgium, was founded in 1949. A lot of people don't think there are skeptic groups that are that old, but they have been around that long. So what else have we got to get done with before we get out of here?
Just the closing credits and
that's it.
The wonderful music.
All right. Let me see.
We'll try to have Blake on sometime soon.
Yep.
Yeah, we will have Blake back. We all love Blake. He's great, and um, um, he will get his Comcast fixed. So we will see you next week, and we'll get the show notes posted up as soon as we can. So until then, this has been Virtual Skeptics. Virtual Skeptics is an independent production of what'stheharm.net, Skeptical Humanities, Brian Gregory, except this week, and Doubtful News. Our logo was designed by Sarah Mayhew at sarahmayhew.com. Our theme music is by Tremor and is used with permission.